How do you compare this crisis with, for example, the global financial crisis or the Asian crisis? Do you think this has the potential to be as bad as any of those or worse?
So during my budget statement, I made the point that it's important for us not to fight the current war based on the lessons of the last war, because every crisis has similar element to other crises, but it also has differentiating factors which we have to take into account. So how is this different compared to the global financial crisis, and how is this similar? Well, what is similar is that there's been a sharp drop of confidence. The disruption to the global economy has been significant. But during the global crisis, it was a crisis of confidence in the financial system, in the banking system. And as a result of which, the impact was largely through financial channels. In this instance, we are dealing with two problems at the same time. The virus and the spread of the virus, for which we actually, while we have some sense of how the scenario might pan out, we cannot be absolutely sure that it will be that way. And in fact, one of the things that we have to do during this crisis is to sketch out what are the possible scenarios. So we have a first draft of it, which we would provide more details to the public later. Based on our contacts with the global experts, based on our own experts, we have some idea of the scenarios in which this could play out, from the very worst scenario to the most optimistic scenario and to a central scenario. Now, in turn, how this virus outbreak is managed and contained will affect the economic scenario. So unlike the global financial crisis, you are now dependent on the containment of the outbreak and not just a pure normal economic engine. And of course, the other major factor is how will the US-China trade conflict and technology conflict and the broader strategic competition be reshaped by this outbreak of the virus? Because I personally feel that when you are dealing with a global pandemic, you need a global response, you need global cooperation. It cannot be that I just safeguard myself. We will have to help one another in this effort. So how that will work out, how the economy will be reshaped by this, will be another major factor. Yeah.
Any other views on comparing the crises?
I was wondering, DPM, yes, the anti-global sentiments that you see prior to the crisis,
yes,
it's not going to help, obviously, you know.
Yes.
So, and the global response is a bit sketchy initially.
Yeah.
What can be done, I mean, in your view, to have a more coordinated global response in terms of trying to manage this COVID-19 issue, to give some sort of reassurance and to communities, to the economy and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say the global responses have to be done by global institutions at different levels,
right,
and for different facets of the economy.
Right.
One is that the WHO will need to play a critical role in this, right, in how we bring together the global resources and the global knowledge, right, on handling a virus outbreak like this.
Right.
And that is really the key mandate of the WHO. So I think it's very important for all of us to cooperate with the WHO, to provide up-to-date information, and to make sure that each of us do not just hide bad news.
Yes.
It is important to be transparent about this, and we can then make a proper assessment of how the virus is spreading or not spreading. And in turn, how we should look at how testing facilities, for instance, can be better done, and that there is a set of minimum responses which all countries ought to have. So I think the WHO has done well so far, but I think that the global cooperation is very much needed. Now, the second is that the global central banks will need to also coordinate the policies, particularly a monetary policy. And I think the monetary policy provides an important stabilization. So the habit of cooperation among global central banks have been building up since the global financial crisis. I hope that it stays. The recent actions have not been very positive in some areas, but I hope that we can continue that discussion. And in particular, the G20 can play an important role in coordinating this response. And within the region, the ASEAN, among the ASEAN plus 3, we can coordinate some of these responses, both to the outbreak as well as to the economic situation and financial situation. And of course, global institutions like the IMF and World Bank must play a key role in this. In particular, the World Bank the IMF has an important role of maintaining stability, and this is where we can build the information and share our assessment of the stability of the global economy. And the World Bank has an important mission of combating global poverty. Now, the virus is not going to respect boundary based on income, and therefore putting in place good measures across different countries. And I think the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, AIIB can all play a role in strengthening our regional and global responses to this outbreak.
I'm afraid we have run out of time, but there is one question, DPM, I must ask. I think a lot of people want to know.
Yes.
And how is the COVID-19 going to affect the election timetable?
Well, I think first and foremost, at this very moment, we're very focused on A, containing the outbreak, and B, managing this impact on our economy. As I emphasized, that we're looking at how we need to save jobs and how we need to help our companies, especially the SMEs, to go through this. And we're also looking at supporting our frontline well. You mentioned that, in fact, many of our frontline workers have been very courageous, and I'm very glad that fellow Singaporeans have been going out, expressing their support for our frontline. And our frontline workers, the morale has remained very high. So I think Minister Gan Kim Wong and Minister Lawrence Wong, together with the task force, have done a good job in supporting our healthcare workers, in particular at the front line, and also our workers at the various aspects of front line, at our checkpoints, at our ambulance facilities, and so on. So this is what we are focusing on now. But the elections have to be called before April 2021. So we cannot deviate from that. And what we must do is to create the conditions that will allow us to manage this situation as to the best of our ability. And I would say that looking at the global developments, I think the virus outbreak is likely to stay with us for longer. And in fact, as I mentioned, you have so many different waves now coming across in different parts of the world. And how these waves are going to interact with the economic environments in this current economic environment is really quite difficult to predict. And it is important that we have all the management attentions to deal with this. And I'm afraid that the management attention that we need to deal with this will get more challenged in the months ahead, because the situation is so fluid, so dynamic, that I think we need to be able to respond as fully as we can as a country and as a people to this very major uncertainty in our lives, both to our health and also to our lives as well as to our livelihood, because we don't know how the global economy will pan out. So I don't want to be alarmist about this. The best case scenario will be that it reverts to normalcy much faster. But I don't think we should plan on the basis of hoping for the best. We need to be prepared for the worst. And so I hope that we will have the conditions to allow us to do that. And that will be a very major factor in deciding on when we call for the election.